Well, thank you so much, Azwi. And as you heard last night, we lost another great South African advocate. George Bizos departed. And the late George Bizos has been hailed as a champion of justice for defending the rights of ordinary people. Bizos, of course, known for representing late former President Nelson Mandela, the Rivonia Trialists, as well as family members of the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement, Steve Biko. And then later on, Bizos also represented ordinary people, including some families of the victims of the Marikana massacre. He died at his home in Johannesburg yesterday at the age of 92 after a period of poor health. And as we continue to pay tribute to George Bizos, we are joined now via Zoom by Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa chairperson, Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane. Advocate Sikhakhane, good morning. Thanks for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakin, and good morning to your viewers.
Firstly, just your sentiments and your reaction to the passing of the great George Bizos.
It's truly the end of an era. I know there are still others who are still alive, but I think George had his own path, a lawyer who actually took unpopular causes for his clients. And I think that generation is a generation to be saluted just for that they did not seek popularity, but would take up any cause for any client and do it to the best of their abilities. And that generation is dying.
Advocate Sikhakhane, in looking at the statement that you released, and you say that truth, justice and compassion died last night, and the passing of George Bizos has left the legal fraternity without a genuine point of reference. And that cuts quite deep and obviously says a lot about the man. Do tell us about the role that he played in the South African legal fraternity.
You know, there are people who are known for being good lawyers and because they fight in court and they do all sorts of things. But then there are people in every aspect of life who are a conscience of that group. And I think George was that point of reference, people who have compassion, who therefore defend others, not because they want money or want to be popular, but just that they wanted to defend human beings. Sometimes human beings he didn't like. He defended them. And so most of the time when I worked with George, we didn't know we were going to get paid, and George didn't care. And that's what we all learned from him, is that he just did matters for people who were persecuted.
And of course, you speak about his independence of mind, and especially given the current context, you know, so much going on today where there's an intersection, especially between the various spheres of government, the political and the legal fraternities, with state capture and everything that is going on. That independence of mind, just how important is that? And what sort of beacon was George Bizos in that regard?
You know, I think for decades, George was one single individual with many of his colleagues of his time, but George had compassion for people. And I think for as long as if we recognize the fact that law is about people, it's not technical all the time. It's about people. It's about people determining their lives. And lawyers like George always remind us that law is not about money. Law is about justice. And justice, the test for our commitment to justice is not how we treat people we like or who are popular. It's how we treat people we dislike. That's the test. And George lived his life during the time when he was accused by those who wanted them to defend people who were popular. And George just did this to the last breath.
There's something else that you say in that Pabasa statement, Advocate Sikhakhane. It says, we shall be burying the last of the old generation of lawyers that sought no glory for their commitment to their clients. You know, and looking at how things are playing out today, where it does seem to be about money, it does seem to be less about principle and ethics these days. You know, you have an advocacy school at Pabasa. How would the life and the principles of someone like George Bizos be incorporated into that?
You know, we do that all the time. We teach people about George and people who want to become advocates. In fact, George, had he not been ill, as he told me, he would have come. We have all this like Prof's effort, because you want to teach people that advocacy is not a popularity contest, and it's a vocation. It's a calling to help those who can't help themselves because they are persecuted. And so George for us was an example, and there are many others, but I just think we're talking about George now, and George's life is an example of that commitment to justice, to defending the defenseless all the time, without any expectation for rewards. And I think that is what young lawyers should learn from George.
And just as we wrap this, Advocate Sikhakhane, on a more personal level, what would be a memory that stands out for you in your association with George Bizos?
Well, George always thought I was his driver. Whenever I arrived at a function, he would call his driver and tell him to leave because I would take him home. He didn't have to talk to me about it. But that just tells you about the man who related with us, young and old. And what I would know about George and remember is just his accessibility, his humility, and his ability to tell stories that reflect life struggles. And that's what I learned from him. When he told stories about his 2 birthdays. I don't really remember which one was the genuine one, but he had 2 birthdays.
And, and I think Lirianne and I also reflected on just how accessible he was as a person. But of course, in terms of the legal work that you do, is there anything that stands out in terms of advice or, any guidance that you may have gotten from him over the years?
Many times, George would call me to the legal center where he worked. And every time you worked with George, he told you that no noise must deter you from your commitment to the person you are helping. And that's what he said to many people. He just didn't listen to what people were saying. If he had agreed to help the poorest of the poor in the Vaal, it didn't matter what you said to George. And so he taught me and many others that when you've agreed to help people, do so without being deterred by the noise outside helping that person. Just commit to them. And that was his philosophy.
Well, thank you so much for helping us pay tribute to the great George Bizos this morning. That was Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa chairperson, Advocate Muzi Sikhakhane, talking about George Bizos and all the many lessons and the humanity that we have lost along with this great South African. All right, we're going to take a quick break.